Hi, and welcome to the Book Nook. So this is going to be my new location where we do all the book reviews. So I hope you like it. So the first book we're going to be reviewing in this new location is called River of Shadows, and it's a book by Rebecca Solnit. This book is, let me get you the correct amount of pages here without the acknowledgments and without there. It looks like there's an appendix of notes. So the book is 259 pages. This is a great book. So before I tell you about it, I heard about this book in a video I was watching on Adam Savage's Tested channel on YouTube, and he was making a flip book, an automated flip book kit. And the flip book kit was a horse galloping. And he mentioned this book. He said that that's what the photos were of. I'm going to explain. And he said, this is a great book. So I said, well, I'm going to read it because it sounded interesting the way he described it. And the flip book kit he made was really, really cool. And again, it was of this horse galloping. So basically, this book is telling the story of Eadweard Muybridge. Eadweard Muybridge is considered the father of modern motion pictures. So he was a photographer. And he basically, there was a kind of an argument going on, which was whether or not when a horse is galloping, are all four of its feet, hoofs, off the ground at one time. But the problem was way back when this was going on in the mid 1800s, there was no way to photograph that because cameras at the time were, you had to manually just uncover the cap to let light in, and it was just your knowledge as a photographer determine how long you should leave it exposing. Then you closed it, and also you had to use a wet preparation of the film. So you had to take film, put the chemicals on it. You had, less than about a minute to get it in the camera and use it. It was and then you had to develop it very quickly. And also the chemistry used in that would not really, it needed a lot of light, a lot of exposure. So you had to leave the cap off and leave it exposed a long amount of time. The problem is motion, anything moving is going to just not even be picked up on the picture. So like when they would take a picture of a street and there would be people walking around, and this is all in here, very interesting. The people wouldn't show up. There'd be no people. There could have been bustling crowds moving around, and as long as they weren't standing still, if they were moving, they wouldn't have been captured on the photograph, and they would just be nothing. Now, if there was something moving that was in the same place, like waterfall, it would be a blur, like a white shadow, they called it, which is why this is called River of Shadows. So anyway, the book is really interesting, and it tells all about this guy, Eadweard Muybridge, and how he was how he came to America from England, how he met up with Stanford, who was eventually the founder of Stanford University, and a lot in the book it describes that a lot of that came from the motion, they call it motion studies of Eadweard Muybridge. So Stanford was a railroad tycoon. He had loads of money. He was part owner of the railroad and was extraordinarily wealthy and made all his money and also owned horses. And this one horse he had was called Occident, Occident, Occident. And so this question came up. So Muybridge had to figure out how to, first of all, make a quicker shutters, right? So that you could expose quicker, but he also had to change the chemistry of the film so that it could accept a quicker exposure. He worked on that. There were other people that invented, he didn't do all of this, but he was the impetus and he put a lot of those steps together in order to make this work. One of the ones that was when he made a shutters that was actually two shutters so that when they separated, when they passed, it only allowed for a certain amount of time to expose, and he was able to capture motion. and also then they had to figure out how to trigger it. You couldn't. The other thing is there's no repeated photos. Once you expose the film in the camera, that's it. That's your photo. So he would have to set up multiple cameras to get shots of each step of the motion. And so that was how he initially did it. And he had like originally, I believe it said he was using like sort of like a tripwire to capture pull each shutter for each camera when the horse would go by. But it was not very accurate, and also the timing between the physical movement of the wire and pulling the shutter. So that wasn't ideal. And it tells about how he then someone another person that was working with him figured out to use electricity, because the book also talks about the invention of the telegraph at the very beginning, and how electricity, moved instantly, and it was a really amazing technology. And so they decided to use electricity to power electric shutters. And so ultimately, he was able to get a series of photos of the horse, and they were able to prove that, yes, there is a point where all four hoofs are off the ground at one time. But this book is so much more interesting than that. That is a very small part of this book. I mean, I know it's the title, but it's everything that leads up to it and everything that comes after it. So meaning, all about the railroads and the technology and the impact that railroads had on early America, right? And how it just really changed everything. Also about some of the abuses that happened with the railroad, ways that they would kind of get around the law in order to put the railroads where they wanted them to go. It talks about that. It talks about how they were paying off politicians, and how there was a lot of corruption, and how they were just making money hand over fist, these railroad barons. And it's so interesting. Again, talks about the telegraph. It talks about the motion studies, and then he did the horses, the photos of Occident. That was the original horse, and but then he did other things. He did like people doing like lifting weights, or jumping, and he did these, and it was amazing to people to see the photos of this motion. And then he was able to take them and put them on, I think it's called a kinetoscope, which is basically a round like tub, or a round barrel, only about a few inches high, and it had all the different photographs around it, and a slit in it, and then a light. And when you'd spin it, you could look in and you would see the animation or the motion reanimated. And remember, back when this first occurred, the amazing thing is that people would only ever see photos of landscapes, because again, it had to be things that were stationary, things that did not move. There was no such thing. And if a person sat for a portrait, they had to sit for a very long time for the exposure and sit still. And like when they would do family portraits, the children would sometimes be a blur because they were fidgety. So to see motion, or even the effect of motion, or time. They mentioned time a lot. The effect of time is really, really was new and amazing, and people couldn't believe it. He found a way using there's a device called a magic lamp, which is basically had a candle, and it would project early pictures onto a wall, and he figured out a way to project and where it would kind of show the motion. And then another, someone after him found a way to use. They had different kinds of films, and to use that where you can take multiple exposures or multiple photos, and it just advanced. But he was the first one to have the idea that, yes, and the drive, and the to do it, to actually do this, to photograph motion, basically frames of a movie is exactly what he did. And then he was the first one to do that, and then put them together in that kinetoscope so you could see it moving, and people were blown away. They were amazed at this, right, at how it worked. He met with Thomas Edison and showed Thomas Edison his motion photos and the kinetoscope, and he showed all that to Thomas Edison, and who then furthered the technology. So it's a really interesting book. If you like photography, if you like railroads, the history of the railroads, I mean, a huge chunk of this, I mean, really all of it, because the railroads go throughout, because all the characters and people involved are, involved with the railroad. So it talks all about that. If you like, again, photography, it tells you all about the history of photography, how it got started, the chemistry, the way it worked. Motion pictures, if you're a movie buff, this is the history. This is where it got started. It's really, really interesting. It's all about America in the early, like I said, mid 1800s. And it says here, I'll read you on the back. It says it's the story of Muybridge, who in 1872 succeeded in capturing high-speed motion photographically, thus making movies possible. And it's all about the transformation of time and space by the railroads, by the telegraph, by photography, and other inventions. This is all post Civil War. And it has some of the photographs in the book. It's super duper interesting. It won the National Book Critics Circle Award for criticism, apparently. And it's just super interesting. I really did enjoy it. It's definitely a really nice, if you're looking for something nonfiction, something historical. It was not a very difficult read. It was really, like I said, interesting and fun. This is a good book. I definitely recommend it. I recommend you check it out. So yeah, thanks to everyone who has subscribed to my channel. If you haven't yet, please click that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Click that alarm bell so you get notified of my other videos. And yeah, leave a comment. I answer all comments. And we'll see you next time.